This is episode 1 of Revenue Talent Talk. I'm Chris Gannon. I'm going to be the show's host. I'm the founder of a company called Captivate Talent. And we are so lucky to have the great Kevin Mulrane on our show today. And Kevin, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I've known you for a while, so my intro might not be as nice as the one you give yourself.
I don't know, man. I've never been one to kind of big up myself, so maybe yours would be nicer. But anyway, yeah. Hi, my name's Kevin Mulrane. I've been in sales for the last 15 years. Held a number of sales leadership roles over the last decade or so. Really enjoy working with early stage startups. Love building teams. Love building out the foundations. Really love understanding how to help companies build and scale revenue. And so, yeah, I've known Chris for a really long time now, probably longer than we want to admit. Yeah, really excited to be here chatting with everybody and sharing my experiences, my learnings, all that kind of great stuff.
And Kevin, I noticed this when JR head of marketing put together, the show notes and everything. I noticed you are now a 4X VP of sales, an ex-CRO, and you started your own venture now, right? What do we got the revenue standard?
Yeah, that's why there's all this gray hair in the beard. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're also working with our friends over at SaaS, right?
That's right. Yeah, love to the SaaS family for sure.
Okay, so today we really wanted to, when we kicked this idea around a couple months ago, and I think since the beginning of June when we were really starting to get it off the ground, things have rapidly changed.
Yeah,
and instead of talking about growing and hiring and all the things that we normally have chatted about in the past 2 years, I really wanted to dive into like what do we do in a down market, and wanted to kind of jump into 2008, 2009. You were first time manager, right?
Yeah. Graduated. Graduated in 07, right? Started my first.
Things were great.
Things were great, right? There's jobs out there. I started my first ad sales job 2 weeks after I graduated. Had no idea what I was signing up for. And then, was kind of promoted to manage and run and build my first sales team in 08. So yeah, definitely got a unique perspective into that.
So yeah, similar on my side too. Came into the job market 2007. Things were cool. It was great. We were, looked around.
What a time to be alive.
There were deals flying, and then it all came crashing down. So I'm cognizant of, not only on my team or probably your teams that you've had and people that have worked for you, that there's probably a lot of people who've never seen a down market out there. And what do you do? It's a really scary time for a lot of people. I'm sure in 2 weeks when the Q2 numbers come out, the word recession is going to be plastered everywhere, and it's a scary word for a lot of people. So maybe we can kick off by talk to us a little bit about your experience. 2008 happens, year starts off good, things come crashing down. If you can remember back and put yourself back in that seat, what were you doing? What were you thinking?
Yeah, I think there was maybe a little bit of a blessing in having the lack of experience and being a bit naive, even, right? I didn't have necessarily mentors, and the other thing too, LinkedIn back then wasn't what it was today. So I didn't have doomsday LinkedIn posts slamming me in the face every single day. So I think that was kind of a blessing in a way, right? So, for me, I thought all right, I knew it wasn't going to be great, right? And I knew things had to change. But I think the first thing that kind of comes to mind, which may be a little bit off topic of this, but the first thing I did not do back then that I would highly suggest everyone to go do, and especially if you're in a sales function where a lot of your income is based off of your ability to sell and commissions, and it's not guaranteed, get your finances and your budgets in order, right? And find the things that if you the things that you don't need to spend money on, just cut it for now. It'll come back later. But I think that was one thing I didn't do. I think for me, I knew it was gonna be hard, so I kind of just flipped the mindset of all right, it's gonna be tough. I'm just gonna have to work a little bit harder now, right? And that's kind of where it started, was I guess the foundations of it. Where I went from there was radical candor conversations with my manager of what do I need to do, right, in order to make sure I'm good.
I think that I don't think it is off topic. I think that is, if anyone out there is actually listening or does listen to this, get your finances in order. If you didn't have a financial planner, maybe you get one, you look at your monthly expenses and really dig into like, ooh, maybe I don't need to be in the watch of the month club right now, like for $400 a month. And
Yeah.
like that might be something silly. If I'm a salesperson, I'm going to take maybe a 10, 20, 30% hit on my total income.
Yeah. You know, and I think it's something that as I got older, I realized like, oh crap, like the value of it, but like get a budget, look at where your money's going, and just again, if I looked at it in hindsight, it's like, man, I wish I was a little bit more conservative with my spending during those times. But yeah, I think there's certain precautions is that one piece of it. The next piece of it though, I think I'm a big mindset person, right? And I think you just need to come to the realization of like, it's going to be harder, right? And I think just starting to prepare yourself for that. So that way, again, as you continue to move forward, as you continue to figure things out, like when you get punched in the face, you're at least a little bit ready for it.
Yeah, and I think mindset is so important. But also, I think if you're more junior in your career, maybe there's a little bit of realization where you can say like, yeah, I don't cost that much money. Like everyone knows what they make and everyone knows what their salary is. And I honestly think that was one of the things that in 2008, I was in a division that went from like 140 to like 47 in the tri-state area. And then I looked around, I'm like, well, they pay me probably the least in the company right now. And, you know, I make 100 cold calls a day. So they're not going to get that output for that dollar anywhere else.
And you know, I know you and I talked about this for probably over the last maybe year or so, is when we were, you know, because we were always talking about hiring and talent and, you know, and we're seeing candidates take these jobs for like crazy base salaries and just these huge uplifts. And I remember us looking at, we're like, there's gonna be a correction. Like there has to be, like this can't go on forever. So I think though, like bringing it back to something maybe a bit more tangible or contextual is like, think about that, right? Like what can you do? And I think this is where you can have communication and with your manager or whoever, like what are the things that you can do that makes you irreplaceable and invaluable?
Yeah. And I think irreplaceable and invaluable is the key. I put up a post like 2 weeks ago about like layoffs and who usually gets laid off first. And it angered one or two people that work for me. And they're like, well, some people like that are good get laid off too, which is totally true.
Yes.
But most of the time when a manager or a leader has to make cuts, they're usually picking the lower performers, and how they define those lower performers. Hopefully they're doing it in a thoughtful way, but that's usually who they're looking at first. And, you know, sometimes there's 100% layoff, like they close the company.
Yeah. I mean, candidly, I mean, there's a lot of hard truths in this, right? Like there's going to be a lot of things that happen that is going to be really hard to kind of come to grips with. But a lot of these decisions are probably decisions that companies are now forced to make that they should have made anyway.
They should have made maybe a few months ago, a few years ago.
Right. Like, and again, I think when you saw, right, you look at the private markets, right? Like tons and tons of funding, the multiples on revenue were things like we've never seen before, completely unprecedented. Right. And then you're getting all this cash and you know, you're looking at runways and you're just like, how is this it wasn't really kind of all adding up. So you knew that there kind of had to be a correction at some point.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what, you know, it was like the check was always going to get written tomorrow so you could spend money that you didn't have like you had it. And it was like, eventually that check, that well is going to dry up. That did.
Yeah.
It actually, there was a question that came in that for someone who's considering a very early stage company, and I know you've had your fair share of early stage companies in your career, what are some indicators that you look for to know that it's a good opportunity? And maybe what are some things that you ignored in the past or saw?
Yeah, I think and I'm kind of taking it through the lens of today, right? You know, I would really try to understand, you know, first and foremost, just the health of the business. So I would ask some tough questions around like funding, runway, like how are the decisions around spending capital, like how are we thinking about that today, right? So I would get into that. There's sometimes, if you're junior, it might be a little uncomfortable to ask those questions, and if you're in the position, hit me up after. Happy to help you with like how to word it, explain it to you so you understand it a bit better. But I would try to get a good sense of like, are they spending like drunken sailors, or are they actually being very thoughtful and thinking about like, yes, these are the critical positions. This is the runway we've got. Okay, you know, and all that. So that's kind of where I'd start. I would then go down into things around like product market fit and repeatability with like revenue motions, right? Do they have a team that's consistently, you know, and especially if you're in a sales position, like, do you have a team that's consistently hitting? Is this a replacement because people aren't performing? Right? Like, try to understand the performance of the current team. And I'd actually ask the question, like, why do you need to hire this position?
Well, I think your that runway question is so important. And for those who are listening, don't know what that means. That means, you know, how much money does a company have left in the bank before they run out of money? But we had an answer. We spoke with a founder yesterday, and he gave us one of the best answers. He said, look, we raised at the end of last year.
Okay.
If we don't make $1 of revenue in the next 18 months, we can still execute our hiring plan. And I was like, oh God, I can't wait to like tell people that, like put that all over LinkedIn. Like, it's one of the more reassuring things that people, if you hear that kind of answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I and it's interesting. Like I work with a company who, just from an advising perspective, and similar, right? Like if they, and now they never had, like, they got a Series A, they're not spending like crazy, like they're being very, very smart about it. And even too, like they're looking at critical roles, but they've got 18, 20 months if they don't make another dollar today, right? Like that's kind of where you want to be. On the flip side, I've even heard, and this was as of recent, this is a very rare case, but another company, they went to their board meeting after Q1 and they said, you have way too much runway. It was like 57 months. Right. And they're like, you need to, you know, and so like there's a healthy balance between the two, right? You want to make sure that, but again, you just have to figure out, like, if it's like under a year of runway, a little risky, real risky. I think if I had to kind of throw out like what's healthy, the 20 to 24 month is probably the healthy place of where you want to be.
Yeah. And I think you do have to drill a little deeper into that too, and ask them about the revenue assumption in that time period. If they're like, oh, we're going to 10x our growth in that 12-month period, and that we're incorporating that into like our runway, it might be a little bit of an issue there.
Exactly. Yep. Totally.
What about like the skill set? You know, we talked about grit, we talked about like hard work a little bit, and, you know, realizing that you have to put your head down. But what else can somebody do to make sure that they come out on top over the next few months or years?
Yeah. So I think where I would start is take a look at your product, your service, and think about, why is it more important now than ever before? And who is that for? Right. So think about, maybe you need to pivot and shift industries, shift personas, but think about, what is it about your value prop it can't be a nice to have, right? If your value prop right now feels very much like it's like a nice to have add-on, you don't have really strong competitive differentiation, like that's not going to cut it. So think about, why is your product more important now than ever before? So that's where I would really start. If you don't have a good answer to that, grab your product team, grab your CEO, grab your founder, like come up with messaging that's just going to be like really, really strong around a need to have solution as opposed to a nice to have solution. That's where I'd start. And then also start to think about, why is it advantageous now, right, to make this decision? Because when a lot of companies stop and they pull back, they go into like protection mode. What you will find is that there's going to be opportunity where companies are going to say, okay, it might be a little bit of a risk, but if we do it the right way, like we can create grounds between our competition. So then thinking about doing something that's going to help growth, that's going to be, you know, help them move forward when their competition is kind of holding back and being safe. You got to think about messaging and positioning that way.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I'm going to bounce around to another question. If you're sitting at a company right now and they just had a 20% workforce reduction, you weren't part of that 20%, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been there before. I think part of it is, again, I'm a huge fan of just like complete transparency and communication. So I think I would I'd ask my manager, like, hey, is that like, what is that by doing a 20% reduction? What does that do for us as a business? Does it give us 18, 20, 24 months of runway now? Or was it like shaving a little off the top and hope things get better? So I would want to understand like what impact that decision and that result will have on the business. And then the next is, okay, great. Of all the things that I could be doing, right? Again, depending on what your role is, but if there's 1 to 2 things that I can do very, very well that makes me irreplaceable, what are those things?
Yeah, I think it is about that. You've said it a couple times, that irreplaceable. Like, how do you make yourself, if that manager or that founder has to look around and say, I got to burn most of it to the ground, like, how do you make yourself that person where they're like, this is the person I want to go to war with. This is the person I want to get through this with.
Yeah, and I think part of it is like having that mentality, right? Like, and kind of showcasing that a bit, and not just like rah talking about it, but like in your actions. So come up with creative ideas. Like, I think the big thing is what you did 6 months ago, even last month, like that's not going to work anymore. So you have to find ways to reinvent yourself. So come up with creative solutions, execute like absolute crazy. If you're a big, like I'm this way, I'm a big math of sales guy, right? Like, okay, here's my number, add 20% to it, my ACV, my sales cycle, my conversions, like, right? It's going to take more, right? Maybe it's 20% more, maybe it's 50, maybe it's double, right? But you can either take the route of like just more and more and more hard work and grit, which is a path. The other path is just how do you reinvent yourself? And again, it's like maybe now there's a new industry, a new persona that there's a new value prop for that you could break into. So there's 2 paths there.
Yeah. I think you've nailed it. And like, I think that is something that I hope so many people that maybe they haven't been challenged in this way before, but they could tap into the adaptability and how you need to adapt quick and aggressively. And you have to, exactly what you said, something that worked 3 or 4 weeks ago, the way you do business is fundamentally going to change. I mean, on the recruiting side, we went from a extremely polarized candidate driven market to now we're flipping back the other way, and we're flipping back fast, which is great if you know how to make that transition.
Exactly.
You're set up to do things one way. It can, be really challenging and difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's and if you haven't been through that before, right? Try things, come up with ideas, test new ideas, like have a hypothesis, communicate it with your manager, have a plan, execute it, and then come back with feedback, right? Like I think that kind of feedback loop is huge, but I think the key thing is it's like, don't show up and do what you did yesterday. You got to show that type of like creativity and reinvention.
I just cheated a little bit. There's like this list that always floats around, and it's like 10 companies that were started in 2008. So it's like WhatsApp was started on the back of 2009. Venmo,
yeah.
Groupon, give it or take if you consider that a successful company these days. Instagram, Uber, like all on the back of Pinterest, Slack, all on the back of a recession. So I think the opportunity that like someone can have, I mean, you have to look at it and say, how do I, a lot of the noise goes away.
You know what I think is really cool too, and kind of to that point, when I I don't want to say call it post pandemic, because I don't know if we're in it, out of it, in the middle of it, like who knows, right? But like when people started picking back up and hiring again, right? And I was back interviewing, I can't tell you how many people I interviewed that all of a sudden had these like really cool side hustles.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we in 08, 09, like I don't know. I don't think it wasn't as easy to kind of start your own little side hustle, your own little e-commerce business. Like I think now is a time where like, if you've got a passion project, like go for that shit too. Right. Like, and maybe that's something you can do on the side that de-stresses you and takes you away from like the computer, the cold calling, right? Like all the CRM.
The LinkedIn doom feed.
Yeah, right. Like I think you got to get away from it. And if you can start your own little side hustle somehow, who knows what that could turn into. But I think that's also a good, healthy balance and could also help you make some, have another stream of income in the short term as well.
Yeah, I mean, when things are good, there's almost a sense of like, you look at like the mortgage, to sound like a dinosaur, the mortgage industry in like 2007, like everyone was in mortgages. I had everyone I knew from high school was in Florida selling mortgages. And if you watch The Big Short, they were like those guys. Like my mom got her mortgage license at one point. My mom should not be ever selling mortgages. If that wasn't an indicator that the
Yep.
bubble was about to burst, it was my mother would be sorry, but you never should have sold mortgages, mom. It lasted like 6 months. But like, there's so much competition when things are good. Like we experience that in the recruiting world. Like
Oh
everyone
yeah.
that had a brand tried to build a job platform or a recruiting platform. And there's so much competition in the market because things are good and everyone runs to it. And when
Yeah.
things get bad, all those people go back to what they used to do.
Yeah, man. I think it's like when they zig, you zag. Like go against the grain. I think that's a huge opportunity right now. Just in general, right? Like call on the CEOs, call on, like, just do things differently. That's I think the key.
Let me ask you. Somebody asked me this earlier today. Where should somebody go to find resources? Like if they're sitting there and they're like, we can curse on this podcast, right? Or the show, or it's my show, right?
It's your show. I already said
if they're sitting there going, what the fuck is going on right now? What's happening in the world? Like where would you go?
Besides call my mom?
Don't call your mom. Don't ask her what's going on.
I'd call my mom first, just so she would, because she would say nice things about me and make me feel good. That's a really good question. And I think, again, kind of going back to the LinkedIn thing today, but like today, I think reaching senior, experienced, talented people, right, that actually know their stuff are a lot more accessible today than it was for me in 07, 08, 09, right? So I think that's probably where I would start. There's a lot of trash out there on LinkedIn too. So you have to have some sort of like bullshit-o-meter. So come to us, we'll point you, either we can chat with you or we can point you in a good direction of people. But like, I think that's, if you fast forward, if I was like entering early in my career, that's where I'd probably start. But anyone that's trusted, right? Like, I think that's the big thing. I look at senior people in your organization, senior people in other organizations, anyone that you feel like you can approach with a conversation that's got the gray beards like us is probably a good thing.
What happened to us the last 5 years?
We still got hair. That's a good thing.
It's still on top. That's good. You have to seek out good, reliable sources, because the media is such a shit show these days, and they make money off of scaring people. They literally will get more views if the headlines are scarier. I've actually really got on into Twitter lately, and I follow just a ton of venture people because that's our world and I need to know what's going on in it. And the venture community, they're Twitter's like crack for them, and I never knew they had so much time on their hands for some of them, but it gives you just really good insights. And sometimes it's there's some good stuff on there that makes you think it's a little inspirational. I could figure out what's going on and I can figure out maybe how to get through this.
You know what? I was thinking about that. As I was kind of thinking through what we're going to talk about today, everyone made it through, right? The shitty times in 08 and 09, we're still standing. You know what I'm saying? So if you're freaking out right now and you're like, holy crap, look, probably the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to come out maybe a couple pounds heavier, maybe a little bit of a worse hairline, a little gray in the beard. You'll be okay. That's kind of the punchline to it. You're going to make it through. You're going to be stronger because of it. You're going to learn a hell of a lot, and it's just all part of the journey. So it's not the first time, it's not going to be the last time, but you'll make it through.
I think I just got a message, get off Twitter. Thanks, Anthony. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think the mindset, it really is a mindset game, and you can control what you can, and there are going to be things out of your control, and you have to accept that. If your company has a layoff and regretfully you're part of that, you just have to double down and say, why did that happen to me? Was it something that I could have controlled? It was in the past. Could I have changed that? And how do I learn from that? What do you write today? Bill Gurley actually put out a tweet. He put a quote.
That one's good. Yeah.
Hard times are sometimes blessings in disguise. We do have to suffer, but in the end, it makes us strong, better, and wise.
Yeah. And you know what, though? I think to that, part of this right now is especially if you're in a seller's seat, it's easy to start to get like desperate to try and close deals, right?
Yeah.
And cut corners. Like I think if you can be super disciplined to your process, don't cut corners, play the long game, right? Because the relationships that you build during this, I mean, you should be doing, again, these are things that you should do anyway, right? If you're in sales, you should always be playing the long game, right? You don't need to close a quick deal today to get that quick commission that's going to blow up later. Like, again, and you and I have this, I'm sure, plenty of times over, but there's relationships that we built years and years and years ago that didn't turn into anything that moment, but they just bloom and blossom into this amazing thing years later. That, if you know what I'm saying, so like, play the long game, build your network, like start doing this, because when shit does hit the fan, like you got to be able to fall back on your network, because that's gonna be your supporting cast with intros, and they can vouch for you and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's like, regretfully, I think the last 2 years, probably with how busy everything is that was almost like a skill that disappeared a little bit. Like people didn't need to network because there was so much money in the market. There was so much business. There was so much to be got after that. Like,
Yeah,
why'd you need a network? Like leads were falling in left, right, and center, and like opportunities were falling on people's laps every day. But now you just have to like double back down on what either made you really good, or if you weren't there yet in your career, maybe look around at what those people that have a few more years are doing, that have
yeah.
maybe even been through this, and follow the lead.
I think that's a big part of it. But again, I think there's so much to be said about just starting to build that network, because there's going to be things like you said, like control what you can control, right, and just obsess over that. But there's going to be things outside of your controls and variables that you just can't do anything about, right? And sometimes you're going to get the shit end of the stick. That happens. But if you've got a good supporting cast and network to fall back on, you'll be all right.
All right, I have one more like tough one for you, and then I think we're hitting like right on a half hour, in which Jay told me that's when I have to like really cut it short. Um, where do you think, and maybe this is a broader like employee like benefits and perks question, but like, do you think we're going to see the market shift back into the employer's hands, and things like remote work and stuff might turn more into like a nice to have instead of everyone's offering it? Like, do you think things like that'll go away?
That's
And
a
you're in a
good
fully
one.
distributed type of role right now, right? I mean, you've been fully distributed like the last
Yeah.
couple of years.
Yeah, I have. I think here's the thing. I think yes and no. And so I think yes, because companies are going to want to have a little bit more, maybe control's the right word, on what's going on, and it's just going to make them feel a little bit more comfortable. I'll tell you this though, the elite talent, whether it's sales leaders, CS, account managers, elite talent that I know don't want to go back.
Yep.
Right. And so I think if you're an organization that wants to find the best of the best, not that it has to be like who has the power, but you have to accommodate.
All right, that's going to springboard us to something else. When you say elite talent, do you mean like people who have established skill sets, have been networked, or have grown a little bit maybe in their career? Or are you saying like the SDR with 1 year of experience, they're elite talent, and they don't want to go back to the office?
If you're 1 year in SDR, you're elite if you consistently crush your number and you're in a league of your own, right? So I think elite is relative, but yes, you can absolutely be elite if you are 1 year in and absolutely running circles around your peers and industry peers, right? So I think you have it, but unfortunately, like if you have a track record of 15 years of doing it consistently, have a little bit more leverage than just the one. But it's a tough one. I think a lot of companies and even employees, this is going to be like a little bit of a tussle over the next few years for sure. I spoke with the founder a month ago, and I was learning more about their business. I'm like, so like, how are you guys doing? Like, how are revenue goals? How are all this coming along? His immediate answer was, we're not hitting revenue goals because people aren't in the office. Our sales team is remote. And I was like, come on, that is so lazy. Like, that is the laziest answer in the world. Is it different? Yes. Do you have to do things differently and maybe be a little bit more creative on training and engagement? Yes. But I think if if you want to go after elite people and elite people don't want to be in an office, you're going to have to figure that stuff out.
Well, let me ask you something on the back end of that. I promise we'll wrap up. If an SDR came to you and they said, I have a year of experience, my company wants me to come back in the office 3-4 days a week, but I don't want to, and they said my job would be cut if I don't, what should they do?
Man, that's a loaded question.
Loaded, and the commentary in the back over here just said quit.
So, well, my answer was going to be, if you have the financial means to do it, quit, for sure, right? When I was 1 year into my job, my first base salary was $28K. Like I was not able to just walk away, and mommy and daddy didn't want me in the house anymore, right? So like, I think that, honestly, I don't think that that's a bad thing, but I think that it's a risky thing. If you're going to be a little responsible, if I'm in those shoes, I'm going to eat shit for a bit of time and put up with it and do it until I can find my next thing. I wouldn't like it, but not everything's going to be perfect and happy throughout your career. So sometimes you got to take it on the chin and just put your head down and do stuff. But if that's not where you want to be, then you can go and find that opportunity to be remote.
Yeah, I do think there is a little bit of a down market comes, there's a little bit of that, you got to eat a little shit factor. And like, it hits at all levels. Like there are people at all levels that are like not happy about it. No, like they're just trying to think of solutions. So I would say, if you are that person, maybe there is a creative solution where you can just perform in a way where you say, well, you could fire me, but do you want to fire me? Like flip it around.
I think there's that, again, like there's a lot of variables there. And it depends who you say it to, right? Like, for example, here's the thing, right? Let's just go through this, because now I'm really intrigued by this. If you're an SDR, right, and your SDR manager tells you have to be in the office 4 times a week, or you're fired, right? It's not the SDR manager who's making that call, right? So, like, are you going to go have that conversation with the founder and the CEO?
And if you are, like, more power to you. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, like I would love that. I would love to see that go down, but I also think you're going to get, like, you'd have to find a way to kind of have the conversation where it's not creating friction, it's creating solutions, right? And I think the way to do that, though, is to say, listen, I really don't want to, and here's the reasons why. Here's what I'm doing for the business. Here's the performance. There's got to be a way to have a happy medium here, right? And I think just showing a little bit of understanding and empathy on that side, trying to understand why they want people back in the office. But like, it's a really complicated topic, because then how do you pick and choose who can come to the office, who doesn't, right? If you perform well,
it's not going to be.
It's not. It's really not. And so I think the easiest thing is, because I think what's happening is, like, companies are trying to get everyone back in because they feel like they don't have the control. It's too difficult. But trying to figure out all this stuff, let everyone be remote if they perform well, right? Okay. And just get creative on, you have to be a little bit more creative on how to train and how to engage and all that kind of stuff, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible.
Well, I think we'll end there. And Kevin, like, first off, thank you so much for being the guinea pig for episode 1 of Revenue Talent Talk. I'll make you a deal. If we make it to episode 20, we'll have music and you'll be the guest. You'll be the honorary guest back on with maybe somebody else. But
I can't wait.
Thank you very much. If anyone out there, if you need any sales advice, sales leadership advice, consulting at a VP level, reach out to Kevin Mulrane. He has seen it all. I've talked with him and been there by his side in his ups and downs, and he just knows the business like the back.
Appreciate you, man.
Reach out to Kevin if you need any help on the sales side of things. And Kevin, thank you so much for being on episode 1 of Revenue Talent Talk. I hope there's episode 2.
I have confidence you'll get to 2, but I'm hoping 21, so I'm back. All right.
Awesome, man. Have a great night. Thank you.